And tonight we're talking about Afghanistan. Just to remind you of who my guests are this evening. Asad Omer is the Afghan ambassador here in Paris. In Berlin tonight, Thomas Ruttig is the co-director of the Afghanistan Analysis Network. In the United States, Ronald Newman is former American ambassador to Afghanistan. And here with me in the studio, Adam Bashko, a researcher at the EHESS Institute and a specialist on the Taliban. Now, before the break, we were talking about the significance or the insignificance of the year 2014. Mr. Newman telling me that is not the time when the majority of troops will be leaving Afghanistan and that combat operations will continue after that. Thomas Ruttig, what are your views on that? I was wondering if you would like to come in on that.
Yes, sure, with pleasure. I think Ambassador Dobbins has not said that the majority of troops won't leave. He said that not all troops will leave. And I think he's correct with this. There will be, according to what can be heard from different sources, between 20 and 30,000 soldiers staying in Afghanistan, international soldiers, as we had it in Iraq, that has been described before. And many of them will be special operations forces and CIA groups. So there's also a problem in this, because we had discussed earlier, and especially that has been mentioned by Adam, that we need to look at the context of what's going on in the moment. And he has referred to night raids, kill and capture operations and so on, which have alienated many people in the Afghan population who are not also sympathetic to the Taliban. So if these instruments are used more, it might also contribute to further alienation amongst the Afghan population. And the second point I want to make is that we also talk a little bit too much about the military side of things. At least as important are the capabilities and the capacities of the Afghan government to deliver services to its population. And we know that access and control over large parts of the country is still at least challenged by the insurgents. And we know that in many outlying districts, there's almost no government and governance on the Afghan side. And we need to really concentrate further on that. And that really has been pushed down the agenda of our governments.
Adam Bashko, you're nodding your head there.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Thomas. There is no doubt that the problem is not that the Americans are getting outgunned. They're getting outgoverned. And the Afghan government with it. If you compare, we've worked with Antonio Giustosi and Claudio Franco on the Taliban system of justice. Today, the Taliban system of justice has more manpower, it's more effective, it's more popular than the government system of justice. And here the issue is not about traditional system of justice, as it is often said. It's a very formal, state-like system of justice. And if you leave a couple of special forces, of course, the Americans will always be able to prevent the Taliban from entering in Kabul. They will be always able to defend their positions. But the problem is not there. For the moment, when the American army intervene in Afghanistan, they're often helping more the Taliban than the Afghan government. And in that sense, the issue today is not one of military strength, it's one of government on one side and of negotiation with the Taliban movement on the other side.
And how much of a problem is it that some critics of the Afghan government say that people in Afghanistan don't trust them? They see corruption brought about by a lot of foreign aid being pumped in very quickly that's created some kind of elite, and they feel shut out of that. And as I said at the beginning, they feel that their values are more closely aligned to that of the Taliban.
Yes, if I may, one thing that is quite important, especially, there is a narrative that is appearing more and more of an Afghan government not working. That's because of it that the Western forces are not able to help Afghanistan. Much of the corruption that is appearing in Afghanistan has to do with the Western intervention. The Americans have been pouring a lot of money, not accounting for the way it was spent, creating a lot of corruption. If you compare the efficiency of the Taliban in terms of governance, one of the reasons of their efficiency is that they're taking great care with the consequences of their action. In many cases, the West has not been taking care of the consequences of its action. It was just doing the process, giving money.
Ronald Newman, the Taliban were originally the enemy, and now we're inviting them to talks, and we're hearing that they're running parts of the country better than the government.
Do you want me just to comment generally, or was there?
What are your
I'm
thoughts?
not trying to be-
It's a provocative statement that I'm trying to get a response from you.
No, that's okay. I just wasn't quite sure which piece to be provoked by. I do think it's important to talk with your enemy. I think at the same time one has to expect that if those talks produce anything, it will be a matter of some years. That's been the example in pretty much every other war. And they may produce nothing, so that one has to understand that talking and fighting have to be parallel actions. They're not alternatives. There's no question that, as my colleagues on this show have said already, there is a serious problem in governance. That's a problem which ultimately Afghans have to resolve. I don't mean that we the foreigners aren't responsible for some pieces of it, shoving in money, but ultimately we can't make good governance in Afghanistan. Afghans are going to have to do that. If they can't do that, then at the end of the day, they will probably lose, in which case I don't think you'll necessarily get a Taliban government. You're more likely to get a civil war. And the consequences of that for Afghanistan will be very serious. The consequences for us will be serious as Al-Qaeda and other groups, I think, reestablish positions in, but not control of Afghanistan and continue their war with the West. But ultimately, Afghans have to stand up for themselves. It's not all the fault of the foreigners. They have plenty to bear, but Afghans have to take some responsibility themselves. Some of that is happening in the army. Some of it is happening in bits and pieces here and there. There are good ministries that function better than others. There are lots of pieces to build on, but the whole is still much less than we need, I agree.
Yeah, we have to see that in 2001, you can have hardly find a skilled, personnel in the ministries, or in any ministries, and only university they had only 11,000 students, but very lack of professor, lack of assistants, and that was a big problem.
But what about the allegation that the Taliban is doing a better job of running some parts of the country than the government?
A very small part, maybe certain areas during night, evening, I think it's quite exaggerated. Parliament are not really controlling a big part of Afghanistan at all, and Helmand already they run away. Kandahar, it's true, in part of Kandahar they were there, and Panjwai, but they ran away. But one thing, as my colleague was saying about justice, how we can say there's efficient justice? It's true that maybe this government has lots of problem. We are trying to address that and all that, but we cannot say in 10 minutes someone comes between two really shift of police. They want to.
It's not 10 minutes, is it? It's 10 years.
Bring people in order to render justice in 10 minutes. How you can, render a justice in 10 minutes is not possible. So just two, and most of them are not educated at all. They're not. Few of them they went through the madrasa, and that's it. So we should not exaggerate that they're efficient and all that. Okay, if you can't say efficiency by just 10 minutes, someone render a justice without the reasoning and all that. Okay,
no, but they've managed to mount an effective insurgency against the world's most powerful armies for a decade.
Fighting, yes. On the question of fighting, if you say there is a terrorist and guerrilla war, they are. But one thing I was saying that the mindset of Afghan society has changed. Afghans don't want back Taliban. That has changed. In no way that Taliban will come back and govern the country. That's out of question. A few demonstration, if you can see, with Taliban flag instead. But one thing I would tell you, look at, for example, when we see all the pancarte, or we say the writing that they are against the United States, was not
death to America.
Yeah, but you know what? It was not in Dari, not in Persian, and not in Pashto. They were written in Urdu. So that means that all the pancarte came from other side of the border.
It's from Pakistan.
Ready-made. So, come on, how?
And this is part of the problem, isn't it? Because
exactly, it's part of
when we
problem.
try and get the peace talks, we need Afghanistan,
exactly.
we need Pakistan, we need the Taliban. But
absolutely.
Your government says that it's Pakistan's responsibility because they're harbouring all the militants.
During the last trips, the visit of President Karzai in Pakistan, they went very well. I think we can say that it was a successful meeting with the Pakistan authorities, and their Afghan government frankly and directly asked that they want to negotiate with Taliban directly. And Pakistani government promised that they will facilitate. Actually, last Friday, there was a declaration by Mr. Gilani, Prime Minister of Pakistan, saying that they're inviting Taliban for a dialogue with Afghan government. Yes, as we said, from the beginning, Afghan government was saying that we would like to negotiate with them, we'd have to discuss with them, if you like, peace. But we have red line, of course, in French, la ligne rouge. That means that they should renounce on the violence, they should accept Afghan constitutions, and they should sever their links with Al-Qaeda. And that's for sure. We are not against the Taliban that they would like to return back to the society, peaceful, and they can fight on political sin. Why not? They can form political party, whatever we say. But because we have this democracy and people like it, okay, maybe not perfect, but still.
So they're invited to talks as long as they follow those preconditions. Yes.
I absolutely agree with you, Mr. Ambassador, when you're saying that most of the Afghans don't want the Taliban back. But that's not the problem. The problem is that more and more people trust more the Taliban, despite not liking them. I have had a lot of people being with very strong anti-Taliban opinions, admitting that if they had a choice between a Taliban court and an Afghan state court, they would go to a Taliban court. To give you just one example of a province, the one I know the best, so as to be sure of what I'm saying, in Kunar, which is a very highly contested province, you have 6 government judges that are isolated in Asadabad. Compared to that, the Taliban have between 1 and 3 judges in each district, which you have between 30 and 40 judges. They have 5, 6, 7 times more judges. They have 800 judges on the whole country. They're institutionalizing the whole shadow institution that they're building. And in that sense, the big question is the question of negotiation. And over that, one of the risks that the Afghan government is running is to have the Americans negotiating with Pakistan, with the Taliban, leaving the other Afghans actors on the side, which would be terrible in case, right. In the beginning of the year and the end of last year, the Northern Alliance has rebuilt itself with a new name. They have been rearming a lot. Indians are pouring money in the north of the country. So the big issue now is really to negotiate with them so as to avoid a civil war that would come.
So we've got a 3-way negotiation, Ronald Newman, between the Taliban, Pakistan, and the Americans. Is that the way things are going to go forward?
Well, you have a 3-way negotiation right now, which I think is seriously deficient. It needs to bring in the Afghan government. We cannot negotiate the future of a time when we are largely out of the country and expect that that will hold. It needs to reassure a great many people in Afghanistan, particularly in the north, who are intensely worried about a bad agreement. I agree there are more discussions now than there were a year ago. And a year ago it was already much more intense than before about the possibilities of civil war. So the negotiations are a good idea in principle. I'm not sure that this very limited process doesn't exclude too many people who can become spoilers. So I have some doubts about the way it's being done.
And how important is this relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan? And do you see any way that can move forward? At the moment, it's very, very difficult, and it is holding up negotiations.
When you look at civil wars and insurgencies that have ended by negotiation, the parties get to resolution when they all decide that they can't achieve their maximum ends on the battlefield. It's not because they decide to love each other. Right now, that is not very clear in Afghanistan. It's particularly not clear because the United States is not very clear about how it's going to move, how many troops it's going to leave, whether it will fund an adequate army. These are all questions I call implementation, and they're all big question marks right now. So, yes, I think you could get to talks, but to get there, you have to have the different combative parties sharing a strategic analysis of what they cannot achieve. And we have a role to play in shaping that, but we're not perhaps doing it as clearly as we could.
Do you think that international forces underestimated the Taliban?
They underestimated them. They made a lot of strategic mistake in estimating them. For example, in the beginning, when the Western forces entered Afghanistan, they were confusing the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, which was a huge mistake. The Taliban are not transnationalists. They don't try to spread jihad out of Afghanistan. They're very nationalistic. They're state-minded. It was this movement in 2002, 2003 could have been reintegrated within the framework, being in a weak position. Today, this is not thinkable in such a way. We're still underestimating them when we're not understanding that military force by the West will not, by any chance, win the war.
And just to end briefly, Ambassador, if I could ask you, we've seen a lot of violence over the past few days in Afghanistan. We've had apologies from all sorts of generals, from the President of the United States himself. What will it take to calm this anger?
No, just if you allow me, just to coming back to that, yes, Taliban, I think we cannot say that we are underestimated Taliban. Taliban, we know where they are. They are safe havens in our neighboring country in Pakistan. All the leaders are in Pakistan. That was we say from the beginning, that Pakistan has an important role to play. And we are very thankful to Pakistan that during the last visit of Mr. Karzai in Islamabad, things are going, we think, that in the right direction. There was a successful meeting, and then they will facilitate, we hope, this discussion between Afghan government
and the violence.
Regarding the violence. Violence, I think, is subduing as going on in certain places, but we feel that within few days will be really end of the violence, we hope.
All right, Asad Omer, many thanks indeed. Adam Bachko, thanks to you. In the United States, Ronald Newman, many thanks. And Thomas Ruttig as well in Berlin. Thanks very much indeed to all my guests. And thanks to you for watching. And that's it for the France 24 debate. Up next is the business. Don't go away. Okay, stay with me.